There we go. And welcome, everybody. This is Gretchen Jordan. I'm the Alive Association Manager, and just like to thank you for coming today. I'm going to turn it over to Amy as our host for today to get us started.
All right. Hello, everyone. We're so excited that you're here today. We do want to let you know that this month's Alive Academy sponsor is Better Impact. So we encourage you to go over, check out their resources, and everything that they can help provide for you. Today's agenda, we will have some housekeeping, a few announcements about some upcoming events. We will introduce Dana, who will have her presentation, and then questions, discussion at the end as well. So you are on mute. We will be using the chat function a lot in this, and as well as the Q&A section for questions, comments. We are recording, so we hope that you're able to stay for the entire presentation. But if you miss anything or you're joining us later, we are excited to be able to share this, and it'll be on the members side of the Alive website. Our next Alive Academy is going to be on May 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern, exploring the career pathways of volunteer administrators. We also want to wish you all a happy Volunteer Appreciation Month. Alive is a Points of Light Global Volunteer Month official program partner. So check out our Alive calendar. We're trying to keep that updated and robust with all the things that are happening. I'll turn it back over to Gretchen.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'd like to introduce Dana, who is a friend and colleague. She's a globally recognized strategic advisor, speaker, and advocate for civic service. Since 2002, she has guided organizations in California's Silicon Valley and worldwide to produce breakthrough volunteer and community engagement programs. Dana is the creator of the YouTube channel Priceless Advice with Leaders of Volunteers. She served as president of Alive and as a founder and facilitator of the National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement. She's a popular guest on nonprofit sector podcasts and blogs, including Time and Talent with Toby Johnson, Volunteer Pro, Volunteer Match, and Points of Light, and has been featured in the Engaged Journal, the Nonprofit Times, the Volunteer Management Report, among other numerous media profiles. And I'd also like to say she's a fine judge of quality shirtwear.
Thank you. We're making a joke that if we had any time left today between people popping off to see the eclipse, I totally get it, Angie and Shirley, and I get that this is very exciting if you're in the path of totality, but I'm also offering, if we have time at the end, to sing any selection that you vote on from Little Shop of Horrors in honor of the eclipse. But diving right into this, thank you so much, Gretchen and Amy. Really, this is building on the fantastic hybrid conference that occurred last October in 2023 and featured Beth Kantner and co-author Allison in this fantastic book and a couple other fantastic presenters on this topic. And this is it's definitely related to it. You don't have to have been at the hybrid conference to get what's going on today, but just to give you an idea of my shape of show, really, we're going to go over what is AI, because there's a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, legends, lore around it. Why does it seem like it's suddenly everywhere and part of everything? And then really dig into very practical day-to-day usage and who and how is designing the prompts or using the AI, or who created it, and how to kind of get the best results. And we're also going to cover the very hot topic of, is it worth it for the help, or is it causing too much harm? And what's the good and the bad, and the ethics of using AI, and some other things to keep in consideration if you are intentionally utilizing this technology. And we will have time, hopefully, for at least 15 minutes or so of discussion, Q&A, and then I'll have a little bit of a wrap-up conclusion and get into some links for more resources in addition to Beth's book. I don't get paid to promote her book, but I think it's fantastic, and I'm going to reference it quite a lot today. So here are a lot of assumptions about what AI is. And this quote is really from a bunch of conversations I've had, but most recently, my sister-in-law happens to be the COO of Riot Games, and the gaming industry and the tech industry have had a lot of conversations about AI, a lot of layoffs, a lot of does this impact jobs? But really what it gets down to is the more I read about popular articles about AI and sit in meetings in which AI gets thrown around a lot, the more I'm convinced that 99% of the time, AI is just a way of saying this technological fantasy and or nightmare that I have. And so part of the objective today, and hope one of your main takeaways, is really clarifying what it is, what it isn't, how to use it to get good results, or whether in evaluating whether it's worth using very actively at all in your work. So I'm not biased one way or the other, but I am biased against kind of the hype and misinformation or disinformation or sales pitches that are kind of floating around, giving people these very extremist views of what's essentially just another technological tool in your toolbox. And kind of just like electricity, it can be used accidentally, or, electricity can be used accidentally or on purpose to harm people, to electrocute or kill them. But it's also used to run heart and lung life-saving machines and all of our energy needs, such as we have in society today. So technology is usually not inherently good or bad or evil or whatever. It's just how people are using it and how people are designing it. So I'd love for all of you to answer in chat. How are you using any AI, if you're even aware that your organization is? Are you using it? Are you using programs that you know are doing it? How is that going in your agency? And if you are using some popular AI apps or programs or platforms, which ones? Which ones are you using most often? So Gretchen and Amy can let me know what's going on in the chat to the answer of that question. So please feel free to get into the little chat box there and let me know how you're using AI, or if you're not aware, if your agency is or is not yet utilizing this tech tool, because as we're about to get to, it's hidden in a lot of things that you may not realize are using AI in most of the work that you're doing every day. How's the chat looking so far, Amy and Gretchen? Unmute if you can as the answers come in.
We've got a couple of different ones. Rebecca says she's not used it a lot herself, but their communication teams uses it for coming up with new ideas for social media posts.
Mm-hmm.
Faiza, hi Faiza, says
Hi,
she
Faiza.
chat GPT most often to help
Mhm.
point me in places I might not have thought of. Mark says that he's experimented with Copilot, but nothing for our program.
Okay.
Angela says I've played with Bard and the new website she's making offered AI to help me. So that was
Nice.
great.
Nice.
Bonnie says we have Copilot as part of our Office subscription and be using it for some things.
Okay.
Liza says we're not used to use AI at her org since IT needs to vet it before we can use it, but dabbled with it personally.
Mm-hmm. Smart.
Several folks have said not that they're aware of, and let's see. Amy says they use Textio for position descriptions, looking for unintentional bias. And I was just gonna post it when we for a live. We don't use any tools intentionally, but every time I go into Hootsuite to do posts, it always wants to break the post for me. But dang it, I'm gonna make my own grammarly mistakes myself. So that's, that there's a real person writing it when you notice the grammar may not quite be right.
Exactly. Yeah. Taking back the reins of what's being automated beyond your control, and what you do intentionally is really the core of all of this. Yeah. And Gretchen knows how to interrupt me. We're in meetings together all the time. We're friends for a long time. So let me know if any other answers or comments or questions come up in chat. And this is an interactive experience for all of us. But I'm going to have about the first 45 minutes to an hour kind of going over some basic ideas and concepts and ways to think about AI, things to consider. But first, I want to define, because this is what bugs me the most about AI or artificial intelligence, is that it's not actually artificial intelligence. It's a marketing term that was coined really in the 50s, but really kind of solidified the phrase artificial intelligence for automation of technology. In 1956, it was Dartmouth summer kind of scientific intensive on new technologies of computing, and we'll kind of get into the history of AI. But it's really a marketing term for applied statistics. So if 1956 at that Dartmouth retreat over the summer, they had started to use the phrase applied statistics, which is much more accurate to what was happening at the time and what's happening now, we'd be talking about AP instead of AI everywhere. But really, it's applied statistics, data analytics. There's machine learning as another term you'll see, and that's really just a way of computers to learn how to calculate things faster. Language learning models, which fuel ChatGPT and Grammarly and spicy autocomplete, all of that kind of stuff, LLMs. But it really breaks down into especially if you're using predictive AI, which we'll get into those definitions too, it's pattern recognition. So this is what, when we use the term AI, and I'm just going to use that term because that's what we're here to talk about, that's what we really mean are all of these things one at a time, working together, being applied in different ways, but it's nowhere near anything that you might see clickbait articles about. It's going to develop into Skynet, and I had a real conversation with a chatbot. You didn't. You can't. None of them are at that level. We're many, many years or decades away from anything being at the level of anything either fun, like Commander Data and Star Trek, or scary, like Megan and the Terminator. We're nowhere near that. What is also not AI is when giant companies like Amazon, and I'll give you this specific example, lie about something else that has nothing to do with even applied statistics or automation, and they call it AI because that's a buzzword. And we're going to get into why that's a buzzword. But there's a very specific example. In 2019, Amazon launched Amazon Fresh in their food stores called Just Walk Out. That was supposed to be, you don't have to check out. It's not even self-checkout stands. You just put things in your cart and you walk out the door and you get billed on your Amazon account. And it's supposed to, again, most of what AI is being sold as is for convenience and time saving. And it was been revealed rather scandalously that none of that was true. It actually was thousands of very, very low wage workers in India that were spying on customers, watching customers through video surveillance throughout the store, and then cross-referencing what people were buying and checking that against each other. What did you see on camera 3? What did you see on camera 4? So that was just a lie. It had nothing to do with AI and automation, but that's a really big jargon word right now. So they called that in late 2023, and there's articles that have come out this year in 2024. Amazon is like, nope, we've stopped that. We've been caught. We're not going to do that anymore. And now they have something that is basically the same scanning checkout computer that we've had for decades in the cart, and you just scan it in the cart. So that was kind of one of the biggest scandals of AI not even being AI at all. So again, this quick history, you don't have to read all these little words, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the timeline that yes, in around the summer of 1956 at Dartmouth College, the term artificial intelligence was coined. And from the 70s to the 90s, there was kind of the AI winter. Nobody was really working on it or caring about it or doing much with advancing automation technology or machine learning and applied statistics. And then it started to pick up again in the 90s as the internet became more than just something that the government and universities use. So kind of with the explosion of the internet and the changes that brought to our culture, that kind of carried applied statistics, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, that carried it along as well. And especially as we started to really turn our economy into a data mining, data-driven internet online economy as a main focus of monetization, it started to get more and more sophisticated. So if you're talking to Siri, if you're talking to Alexa, again, they don't have their own sentience, they never will, but they're trained by all these millions of users who are currently using them. They're kind of being trained themselves with sometimes human supervision, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot, and it's really just exploded. Why it's exploded? Why is AI suddenly everywhere, especially the last maybe 5 years, but really, again, this technology has existed for a long time, and it's really been in use in the internet for at least 15, 20 years, but the last 10, 10-ish years have drastically accelerated, especially the last few years, about 5 years have accelerated because of money. Money makes the world go round, and Silicon Valley, just here we give you a business model in general, very simplified, of Silicon Valley finance and tech business finance, internet finance in general. Most tech startup companies, pretty much all tech startup companies, and even things like before Twitter was run into the ground by Elon, most social media sites have been designed to run on a loss. So investors pour money into it, startup investors or ongoing investors, and someday the customers, the user base will be monetized in some magical way. And that's really been how Silicon Valley and the tech industry has always run. However, most of the time that was going on until a few years ago, carrying debt of a few thousand or a few $100,000 a year for a tech company was standard, and it wasn't that expensive. It was worth building the customer base to someday make real money from it, to operate at a loss for sometimes several years at a time. A few years ago, when the interest rates started to go up, suddenly carrying that debt became twice as expensive or more. And that's when you started to see publicly AI everywhere. The mechanisms of AI, applied statistics, machine learning, spicy autocorrect, chatbots, that's already been kind of behind the scenes, mostly invisible, sometimes in a shady way, sometimes just in a nobody cares about it way, or we're just not telling you about it. It's in this feature. But suddenly, the keyword of AI became a very public way and a piece of jargon to have tech companies and especially startups get investor financing. It really just became the key word of the day. It's also a bit of a bubble. So just like crypto became the Silicon Valley tech bro thing for a few years and crashed, NFTs became the very fashionable, fun, shiny new thing that's going to revolutionize everything, and that's crashed, and people are going to jail for fraud. I'm not saying that AI completely will collapse, because again, it's really based on data analytics and math and things that are pretty solid. But the most common way that AI is used, generative AI, doing writing, doing art, imitating actors' voices, things like that, that's probably what's going to, in my personal prediction and talking to my friends and family who are experts on this and researching this topic, that's probably going to have a bit of a bubble and a collapse in the next couple of years because of regulations, lawsuits, copyright, things like that. But it's really just like nonprofits want to put keywords into certain grant applications that they know are more likely to get them money. That's what AI has become to the tech industry. And again, sometimes it's ethical, mostly it isn't in the way it's being used, but we're going to get into that. So there's a couple different types of things that are AI prompts or types of AI that are used. One is generative AI, and that's typically used for the creative arts. So doing writing, creating artwork, things like that. However, the problem with using AI as a tool in that way is it's really the wrong way to use the tool. The best way that AI is used, I'll get into that specifics in a minute, is really more predictive AI and that real data analysis and closed data sets. So anything that's generative AI is getting a sour taste in public opinion because they're seeing that artists are being ripped off, writers are being ripped off, and it's becoming apparent that AI or applied statistics and data mining as an economic force in general just starts to feel really intrusive and icky and unethical. And what it's really doing is taking anything that you write, anything that you post, and scraping it, term is scraping, all together, and trying to come up with something original and interesting. So if you're playing around with, oh, my new profile picture is AI generated, a lot of the apps are free and set up to be very fun so that they get you to create the product for them. And that's what is going on with AI right now, especially generative AI versus predictive, is that you are the product, you're the producer of the product. Everything you post, all of your personal data, all of your again, writing, art, anything creative, music, but you're also the consumer. So generative AI kind of creates this exploitation and extraction loop to make its money, to monetize your information and your data. And rightly so, there's a lot of pushback from artists and creatives that this is solving a problem that doesn't exist. We can support the arts and we can use AI as a tool without hurting artists and creative people. It doesn't have to be used this way. So why has that become the main way that it's public facing, it's being used? What's way more efficient and effective is when you're doing good old fashioned nice math, tedious, boring data analytics, predictive AI, where it's data and you build a model and you figure some things out, you monitor the results and you identify a problem and then you find the data about it. And that's how predictive AI or applied statistics is really at its best use, where it's drawing on specific closed data sets or databases. And one example of this, if you're using a volunteer management software system, or like Gretchen, you're talking about, Hootsuite asking if it can write stuff for you. It's like, well, okay, maybe that saves time, but a better use is of you having predictive AI instead of generative AI in your volunteer management software, for example, saying, oh, I've noticed a pattern that I'm bringing this to your attention that it's been really hard to fill shifts on the third Thursday of the month, and why would that be? So it kind of prompts it points out a problem or something interesting or unusual to a human in pattern recognition within a database, data sets. And then you get to decide as a human how you want to deal with that, or if you want the AI in the database to help you figure it out. That's really the better use of AI. So there's a real thing called the tech hype cycle that all kinds of technology go through. And we're really at stage 2, which is the peak of inflated expectations. Early publicity produces a number of success stories and accompanied by scores of failures. However, because AI is the big money-making keyword, the vast majority of any ads you see about a new AI app, they want you to think that we've gotten rid of all the problems and the trough of disillusionment and the slope of enlightenment. We've already figured all that out. And we're at the plateau of productivity where mainstream adoption starts to take off. And we have the illusion of that. We have the hallucination of that because it seems like it's ubiquitous and it's everywhere and it's in everything, and whether you can help it or not. But technically, for the kinds of iterations of where that kind of software is, whether it's generative or predictive, we're really still kind of in the baby steps of it. And that's the main reason that we're nowhere near cyborgs and robots being sentient and having a revolution, or Megan doing a weird, creepy hallway dance. We're nowhere near any of that because we're technically still in a pretty early stages of this iteration. How we doing in the chat? I know that's been a lot of information so far.
Looking good in the chat so far.
Okay, great. Just wanted to check in about that stuff. And so where are you finding this in daily life? Some of you answered before that, yeah, okay, I know that I'm using, ChatGPT to generate ideas. I'm using Grammarly. I use Canva, but I use it in a way where instead of using Canva's built-in pictures, I get licensed stock photos and I upload them, and then I use Canva to build that out. And that's one approach to, that's just my approach, where I feel like I can ethically use AI by not stealing from other artists, where I find something where an artist has been paid to license their work, their photograph, their graphic, like you're seeing in the slideshow. These are all licensed stock photos, where they're not my own photos. But really, it's everywhere. It's in all the search engines. It's causing the search engines to not be very accurate anymore, which is a big problem. It's in LinkedIn, it's in HR software. Beth and Allison mentioned in the book that something like 83%, I believe, of HR companies are using an automated or AI-driven software to make hiring decisions. So that's pretty significant. If you've been on LinkedIn and you've noticed lately that There's they're asking you to contribute to an article, contribute to this LinkedIn article. What do you have to say for it? That's an AI trying to get you to give it more training information so that it can own and synthesize what you've just written in your answer and use that to produce more things. So it's really everywhere. It's all over social media, not just images and videos, but misinformation, disinformation, all the annoying bots that jump onto threads and you're like, what's going on with this? Customer service chatbots have been using, again, AI, pattern recognition, voice synthesis for a long time. And it's in Zoom that we're using today. I've had a funny thing happen where I sometimes do a thumbs up in Zoom and a little bubble of a thumbs up pops up and I have no control over that. And it's in Grammarly and it's all over MS Office and Google trying to, fill in things and if you're using Google Suite. But again, where it's probably the best use is one of the starting to become some of the most common, but in CRMs, databases, I'm not yet aware, and maybe Gretchen or Amy has an answer about whether Bitter Impact is starting doing this, but I know that different volunteer management software systems are exploring more automation and maybe using that predictive or assistive AI just within those closed data sets. A really good use of AI is the STEM stuff, math, technology, not all technology, most technology, engineering and mathematics. That's really the best, whether it's generative or predictive, that's really the best use of this tool. I have friends who are doing incredible things with fisheries and oceans data and climate change studies, who are marine biologists. And they, a lot of good can be done with this tool and technology, DNA sequencing, other, biology applications, life sciences, earth science applications. There's great use of this data analytics, applied statistics, and predictive models of how the grow zones and around the planet are going to shift, and water usage is going to change and shift depending on climate change and desertification and other factors. Math, good old-fashioned math, those predictive models, quantum computing, structural engineering, physics, astronomy, AI helping telescopes understand, oh, in this section of the sky, we should be seeing this kind of pattern, and our telescopes can't see it yet, and then telescope technology catches up. So if you're thinking about it as this, scientific tool, that's really kind of the best use and the long-term use that these kinds of AI things have had. And we'll circle back again to kind of more day-to-day practical tools. But in general, AI, especially running robots with a little bit of human supervision or remote control, it's really best to do tasks that are too dangerous, too difficult for humans to do, or that we do too slowly, like quantum computing. We can't quite think that fast to solve big problems. And it's been doing really great work in detecting and diagnosing diseases, especially for different cancers, of kind of filling in these, predicting patterns in a data set and then helping come up with solutions that are analyzed by people. Bad use of AI, imitating people, imitating celebrities, violating copyright. This, you might have seen in the news, this big news story about the Carlin family, Kelly Carlin. A company generated an AI artificial George Carlin and started to post a bunch of videos of his new material. And thankfully, Kelly, his daughter, sued them out of existence. And so again, the role of ethics in all of this is becoming more and more important, especially when you do have control over how you're using AI and how you're applying it in your personal life or in your work. Also, again, the generative model tends to just be plagiarism. It's just plagiarism. So anything that's replacing human creativity, art, writing, music, acting, the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes, a huge core element was that you can't use AI to and CGI models that maybe a Marvel movie has built of a famous actor. You can't keep reusing that and not hire the actor anymore. And then, very, very harmful things, impersonating people, celebrity deepfakes, political deepfakes, fraud, phishing scams. misinformation, purposeful political disinformation, voting info. There was a series of robocalls on the East Coast that where an AI imitated Biden's voice before the primary elections a couple of months ago in those states with wrong voter information. So we're also seeing academia trying to do research and draw from research or publicly available research that's been poisoned accidentally or on purpose by generative AI creating mis and disinformation. So it can be pretty bad. And then we get into, you've probably read a lot of articles, several nonprofits in the US and Canada and the UK have gotten into really, really serious trouble where they have crisis lines that used to be manned by paid staff or volunteers, and they started to use AI and voice synthesis, and it gave harmful advice, opposite of good advice. Organizations are getting sued. The rage engagement bots. So a big part of monetizing online life and the internet is just clicks, and it doesn't matter whether that's a good emotion or a bad emotion. You just need to create a strong emotional response to get more eyes on ads or more clicks on things. Whether it's going to a phishing scam or not, rage engagement is an economic model of the industry. And unfortunately, we're already in the middle of seeing AI used in war, making decisions of life and death, which it should never do. A machine, any computer program should never make a life and death decision. And here in the USA, I don't know if we have anyone beaming in from Canada or elsewhere, because of our medical insurance system, AI is more and more making decisions about denying care or not approving benefits without any humans checking the work. So when we get down to the ethics of all of this, it's really about what I kind of think of the help versus harm scale. And there is a lot of harm that is inherent in any big use of technology because it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of rare earth metals and minerals that are often in conflict zones like Congo, or Elon Musk bragging that he tried to fund a Bolivian coup to get their lithium for electric car batteries and servers and things like that. One of the statistics that was just a methodology that was just released by Dr. Peng-Fei Li and his colleagues, they made a methodology to gauge how much water different AI apps use for the servers to generate the energy. And they found that training GPT-3, that kind of generative chatbot, required 210,000 to 100,000 to 700,000 liters of water, which is equivalent to producing between 300 and 1,000 cars. There is a huge, huge environmental cost to running the technology that is creating AI and creating these programs. And that was true of crypto as well. A 20 to 50 question chat GPT conversation, that's a pretty average conversation, drinks uses 500 milliliters of water per one of those little conversations. So then when you multiply that by millions or billions of conversations occurring, you can see how that, has some very serious environmental impact that is being done. Regulation and governments, they're kind of playing catch up to all of this. One of the links that I have in the resources talks about kind of the latest on what laws or regulations can be created to help mitigate the harm of AI and kind of clarify ethical and legal things. But really, we're playing catch up. It's a little bit of an arms race to, what's AI doing and what are governments doing in response. And again, especially for generative AI, that could be that companies like Midjourney or DALL-E that do these kind of art or writing programs, they might be sued out of existence pretty soon, just because larger corporations are realizing that their intellectual property is being used without payment or permission. And then we want to think as individuals and for our organizations, what does that privacy look like? What's the data use? How is our data being used with or without our permission? Is our data going to be lost? Is it going to be exposed in hacking incidents or dark web sales. So there's a lot about that. We're going to dig deeper into these, but I just kind of wanted to introduce this idea of help versus harm. You can have an automated, mostly AI making decisions robot that goes and uh, takes care of a bomb or, again, something dangerous to humans, and humans might be supervising it or adding prompts or orders or ideas to the actions it does, but it can make some decisions of how to deal with that. Or it can be used, as it is often in policing and prisons, where it's doing facial recognition that is absolutely biased against people of color, and prisons are starting to use predictive AI on whether or not they release certain people or they deserve their freedom after they've served their sentences or are up for parole. So it's really starting to be used much more commonly in a very, very potentially harmful way to infringe on civil rights and human rights overall. Okay, how we doing in chat, everybody? I'm seeing a couple
Looks,
things pop up. Let's catch
yeah,
up with chat.
there's some reaction to just how easy it seems to be
Yeah,
to copy, imitate, and deceive right now with AI. You know, like anything, there's good and bad uses.
Mhm.
And then the water and energy use comment as well. Also, the question, who is paying for these expenses when it's
Exactly.
free cost to me as a user?
Yeah, so that gets down to you are the product and you are the consumer. So ultimately, you are paying for it because investors are investing in this because all of us individually, all of the information we put online, and even stuff that we don't think is online, but can be extrapolated by this AI, this applied statistics, um, that's how it's monetized, is our data is being sold to advertisers. So that's how you get personalized ad. That's how you may have a conversation with your smartphone or an Alexa nearby about taking care of a cat. I was this Easter weekend, I was teaching my nephew, 14-year-old nephew, about like this is how you take care of a cat and scoop a litter box. The last 3 days, I've had very constant ads for an AI smart cat litter box to come into my all of my social feeds, particularly like still checking on Facebook and Twitter and things like that, Blue Sky. But that's how we're monetized. All of our information, it's becoming so that our own privacy and personal information and anything we write or do or think that can be grabbed by these bots, by these scrapers, becomes public property and gets sold to anyone who wants that advertising information for targeted advertising. And then we buy those products. I'm not going to buy a smart cat litter box. I have my nephew do it. But that's how money is being made. And the reason you're hearing about it suddenly is because that was happening behind the scenes for a long time. And then sites like Tumblr, for one social media example, it's pretty, not a lot of people use Tumblr, but they realized that a lot of artists are using Tumblr or Patreon or DeviantArt or Redbubble, and that information without anyone's knowledge or permission was already being scraped and data mined and used. But there's now this awareness and this kind of coming out, if you will, of aha, AI, and isn't it shiny and helpful, and it will help you do these things. But ultimately, all of us pay the price, and the planet and the climate pays the price for the energy use, just like it did with crypto and it does with using fossil fuels. And there's a lot of variables, but ultimately we're in a closed loop where we're sold things based on our own information and data that's being mined, and that's how we're all being monetized right now. And I know that's bleak, but that's what's going on. Hopefully that helps. Any other questions or answers in response to that?
Yeah, just the comment that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And sometimes you pay for the product and you're the product, like
yeah,
Canva,
yeah, yeah. And just
yeah, it's this is why we took 90 minutes for this topic. Um, so things to consider, just again, this incredibly complex stuff. People devote entire careers and lifetimes to the study of this and the impacts of this, but just as a way for us to think about it in our day-to-day work as lay people, we're not, most of us, I'm not a coder. I know a lot of tech bros. I'm related to some tech people, but it's not, it's not my everyday jobby job. But when you think about AI, you're thinking about what are the prompts that are telling it what to do. The data, where's the data coming from, how it's being used. You should be transparent about when you're using it, what level of transparency is the organization who's using an AI product and the company that's creating the AI product, how transparent are they? And really, what is the reason you're doing it? What is the why? Is there a solid reason that makes sense to the organization to use a particular AI product, or if you just have an awareness that it's already in Hootsuite and Zoom and this other software and platforms you're using, then it's still important to understand the why of those companies putting it in there. But ultimately, it gets down to humans and things being human-centered. So this is the promise of the premise of how to get these ethical, accurate, and human-centered results. We're getting into that section. So prompts are, that's the input that you put into an AI system or app or program to obtain specific results. And the quality of the prompt is everything. It relates to all of the ethics, it relates to the accuracy, it relates to whether the output or outcome or results are human-centered. But that's what a prompt is, just to get you familiar with that term. And an AI system, again, machine learning is another name for this. They're continuously learning from those inputs and prompts from you and from other users. So that's how ChatGPT or Grammarly is learning, is being generative and being predictive, and it's this kind of hybrid model. And there's a whole career path and a whole system of prompt engineering that's how to select the right context, the right words, the right phrases, the right symbols, the right formats. And again, I have a link in our resources of kind of some articles about that from MIT and other organizations. But ironically, one of the jobs that's now being replaced by AI is prompt engineer. So more and more these companies that are making these products with AI, any type of that, machine learning or applied statistics, they're having the AIs write prompts for other AIs. And I think that's not necessarily a good direction for accuracy and ethics. And you also want to think about with prompts, as being as specific as possible. So example of a good prompt, and this is again very simplified, discuss the economic implications of climate change in developing countries over the next decade. Great, there's pretty good amount of that I know where to look for that information, whether that's a closed data set or it's scraping from everywhere online. A bad prompt is kind of a really vague or open-ended thing, like tell me about climate change. And those bad prompts are more likely to generate AI hallucinations, which are filled with misinformation and disinformation because it doesn't know from just that simple prompt, that bad prompt, not to draw from flat earthers or climate denialists or someone who's running a satire site. AI doesn't understand humor or satire or irony. So they just are looking for keywords and phrases that relate to the prompt. And that does create a very real phenomena called AI hallucinations, which is the core of really things like ChatGPT or other generative and semi-predictive programs telling you what you want to hear versus what's factual and true. And a recent Stanford study showed that just with a simple math question, ChatGPT's answers over the course of just 3 months, because they kept doing the same answer for 3 months, went from about 60 to 70% accurate in the answer to the math problem to 2% accuracy. So ChatGPT on the same question, a math question, became 98% factually, mathematically inaccurate because it's drawing from the Internet of Things, which we know is filled with a lot of garbage, all that purposefully or accidentally. There's a lot of very inaccurate information going on, and that's what a lot of these programs are drawing from. So, and that relates to the data sets. So a data set, and again, if you've used something like volunteer management software, donor management software, any kind of database that we've been using for decades and decades, that has data sets. That has data sets that are typically closed. It's your data that you put in about your team and your people and what they're doing and when they're doing it. But really, a data set is any group of data information that's grouped into a collection. And the parameters for data that's part of designing what an AI is going to do. So sometimes these parameters can be done by you, depending on the program and how much customization you have. But most often these parameters are set by the original people writing the code for these. And you can think of it as, I'm a musician. I have a lot of synthesizers in my music room upstairs. So you can think of it, the parameters are like different knobs on a machine. You can make adjustments and you can set the parameters of what it's going to do and how it's going to do it. And in the case of especially AI, more is not better. The quality of the data that it's using or being trained on is much, much more important than the quantity. And that's what is the big problem that AI is creating right now, is this huge, inaccurate, unethical misinformation, disinformation that is getting into, even academic papers. Research is being spoiled, or it's also the word corrupted is often used for information that isn't accurate. And there are a lot of other features too, thinking about data, again, this open scraping from the internet and kind of public sources or public domain versus closed data sets. And an example of an open data set is Midjourney, very popular art, generative art, AI art thing. They're also about to be sued by a lot of people, specific artists, living artists, not just like the estate of George Carlin, but living artists are saying, hey, you grabbed my art from my Patreon page, from Tumblr, from Twitter, from, some other social media site, from, DeviantArt, or where I design things on Redbubble or Etsy. And you say in the style of me, but it's me, it's my art, and I never gave you permission to use it. So that's probably going to be, again, part of that bubble that will burst in the next year or two. Adobe is taking a different approach, and they do Photoshop and Illustrator, and they're known for their art design and film editing programs. They've created a licensed, paying the artists, paying the photographers, closed for Adobe database called Firefly, and that's their answer to trying to be ethical and trying to do the right thing with generative AI to help somebody. Again, most of you answered, I'm just trying to get creative ideas. I'm just trying to get a starting point. Other people are using this to refine their art, but at least that database is licensed and known about by the people who contributed the training art to it. And data is, again, it's being used in a generative way for AI or predictive. And more often a model is a little bit of both. It's generating some stuff, whether it's closed or open, and it's predicting some other stuff with applied statistics and pattern recognition. And it's kind of melding it together to get the best result possible. And there's a lot of things to formatting data that this webinar isn't about, but numerical features, categorical features, metadata, formatting, the size of the files, the target variables, and data entries. But if you're working with, again, your day-to-day job is probably going to mostly involve a CRM or a VMS database. If you're using something like Canva or Hootsuite, where they are partially grabbing from the internet in general to create their product, or help you write something. That really annoys me when Google tries to help me write emails. I'm like, nope, it's my writing. I'll take the spelling errors. I'll take it. I'll take the heat. But that's more and more, it is becoming automated to save time, but we have to look at whether that's really the case. So when you're thinking about accurate AI results, the key, again, is that it's human, it's checked by humans, it's supervised by humans, it's proofread by humans. And being as specific as possible about the goals from those high quality, good data, closed data sets. And to, rather than thinking about, ooh, what's this prompt and how can I make it interesting or creative, reverse engineer it and think about, what problem am I trying to solve? Because again, like at the beginning with generative AI, a common perception is like it's not solving a problem, it's creating a problem. So how can you use this tool, this tech tool, to solve problems instead of create problems ethically or with accuracy? And as we've known for a long time with the internet and any kind of database, all of this is garbage in, garbage out. The quality of the results and the accuracy of the results and the ethical quandary of the results that you hope to get has everything to do with what you put into it, no matter which kind of AI tool you're using from which company. But the garbage in, garbage out is absolutely going to apply, especially to this AI use. How's our chat doing? Everyone's brains exploding?
Yes, definitely. Lots of reaction, fascinating and terrifying. There was a question about the prompts on LinkedIn.
Yes.
So it's good or not good to answer them.
I am not answering them. I get asked to answer those. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I think of most of you who know me understand that. I don't. I actually I don't need that kind of exposure, and I quite frankly don't want to create the danger that something proprietary to me, like the 3 C's of happy volunteers, suddenly LinkedIn thinks belongs to nobody, and it's spreading that information through a LinkedIn suggested article that's AI written from my contribution. So me personally, I choose not to do that. It's entirely up to the rest of you as we go through this. If you're not shaking in the corner in a little ball rocking by the end of this, you shouldn't be. There's also a lot of positive stuff about this AI, but I personally choose not to participate when I'm prompted or asked, because I know exactly what it's really trying to do, and it's probably not going to help me or my career or my brand with that. Hopefully that helps. Anything else going on in chat? Stunned silence.
No, it looks like people were, sort of ignoring them and just didn't understand who and why they were contacted. And
Yeah,
so
that
I think that's helpful.
That's the one that I really wanted to make sure everybody understood by the end of today, is when you don't quite know what AI is trying to do with your information. But that's why it's important to be transparent. And a great phrase to include if you've used ChatGPT to prompt an idea or start to do some research with any other kind of AI tool is to just say at the bottom of the blog or the article or on the organization's website, this article was generated partially with ChatGPT or AI assisted research, but it was edited and proofread and originated by humans. And our dear friend and great consultant, great person, Rob Jackson, he's very open. Like, I use ChatGPT and other things to get creative ideas, to start prompts, and he discloses it. He has a little sentence at the end of his blogs and there's articles when he's done that, because for him, he's found that saves time and that's helpful to him. So just be transparent about how you use it once you have an awareness and a knowledge of how you or your agency are using AI. And then that helps you to mitigate and do your best to be knowledgeable to mitigate the inherent biases and risks. Again, tons of nonprofits, especially doing therapy lines or crisis lines or voting information or disaster response, they've been in really, really serious trouble by using AI in a way that is not the best use of that tool, that's in trying to communicate with humans about human emotions and human problems. And we'll get into that in a second too. And again, I think it's helpful to just do like a little bit of research, even though Google and the search engines are pretty skewed by bad AI results, but try to just find out like what's going on with the company that's creating this project. And a very recent example is Sam Altman with I think OpenAI, Pfizer, was that right? And he got fired as a CEO, or no, sorry, ChatGPT. He got fired as the CEO, and then like a few days later he got rehired. And the whole kerfuffle was that he was allegedly extremely verbally, physically, and sexually abusive to employees in the company. Like, he was just a bad, toxic boss. And if you've ever worked for a terrible, toxic boss, you know exactly what that feels like. So he was ousted, and then stock took a hit or something, and then the board brought him back, and they're like, never mind, I guess he's fine. We're going to keep going with this. So there's, again, huge reams of academic research that could be done on the mentality of the people who run these companies and the actions they take in their personal and professional life with their companies, that have to do with extraction and exploitation and bad unprofessional behavior. But sometimes it's worth noting, like, what's the origin story of this tech company? And then for your day-to-day work in life, what's that accountability look like? What happens to that point? Who pays the price? Well, who pays the price if the suicide hotline is telling people, like, giving you map directions to the nearest high bridge to jump off of, which is pretty close to real examples of what was happening with some crisis lines. It was giving advice that would drive people in suicide ideation to action. So who's responsible for that? Does somebody get fired? Does somebody get arrested? Does somebody go to jail for harm? So that's a huge part of being as transparent and knowledgeable and intentional as possible, is who's taking on that risk, and do you have a crisis communication plan if you're using AI extensively to react to the inevitability that it's going to crank out something that causes harm in the community? Another, again, the kind of the core of the ethics of it is, what is the why? What is the reason you're using AI? And again, it's a neutral tool. It's just how it's used. So be intentional, be mindful, be knowledgeable. That's a huge chunk of what Beth and Allison talk about in their book, and what Beth talked about at the hybrid conference. And really take an honest, factual evaluation of, is this app, is this thing, is this automation really saving you time and money? Because if you have to keep checking the work, or the work is inaccurate, or it takes a huge learning curve and a lot of time to train everybody how to use an AI tool, is that really saving time and money? And be really savvy about what's a shiny sales pitch, and what's the reality of that product. And again, I'll take it to a VMS example, or really, what software have you bought that doesn't quite do what the salesperson told you it was going to do? And you had to keep going back to tech support to figure it out. That's true with this tool as well. And ultimately, the why and the problem that you're solving. So don't just use AI when there isn't a problem for it to solve, but think about that end goal. Be really careful about defining specific milestones, measurable metrics of success. Are these the outputs you're expecting or want from this product? And are you getting the desired results using anything that says it is AI? How are we doing in the chat?
There's definitely some more questions coming up. So one of them is, how do we protect ourselves and our brand or information? And then the other one is asking specifically about, in Mac, there's some design options that come up and they use them. Is that a form of AI?
It is a form of AI, but I can say, and not just because I'm married to someone who works at Apple, but I can say that Apple is probably doing better than most of the other big tech companies, especially compared to Google or Samsung, on how it's really very good at user privacy. It's much better at user privacy in its products and in platforms generally than these other companies. However, your stuff is probably being used to train some stuff. And again, as a company, they seem to be attempting to do it as ethically and legally and guarding privacy as possible. But this is a giant tsunami of AI innovation constantly crashing against all of us. And so we'll see if that remains the course. The only way to really protect yourself or your agency is to have information like this, is to know how it works, a little research into the company or the product, Make sure it's really solving a problem that needs to be solved, and you're not just falling for a really, really shiny sales pitch or, hey, this is free, and then later on it'll start to be a subscription model or pay for itself. And that gets into, I know Faiza, ethics is one of your favorite topics. The who and how helps us evaluate the help versus harm. So who designed the app or the program? What person, what company? You don't have to like do a whole background check on them, but just maybe a little bit of research into how that came about. Who was writing the prompts? Are they built in when you get the product or the platform, or do you get to customize that yourself? What are the human biases of the people who wrote the code, created the app? You know, we had the stock photo of the two nerdy guys doing the Vulcan salute. That is demographically, the majority of people working in Silicon Valley and for tech companies are wealthy, white, and male people, followed closely by Asian, as in Indian subcontinent peoples, in China and Korea and Japan. And there's a very, very, very low percentage in all of the tech companies, including Apple, of Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and other representation. It's just not set up to be very inclusive and welcoming, despite or sometimes because of certain company specific DEI initiatives or goals not being carried through to good hiring and day-to-day practice. And also, quite frankly, the fact that a lot of the HR sorting programs and applications are using AI. And so all of this tends to be towards that white male or wealthier point of view, where it's harder to recognize what those biases are. And who and what, speaking of which, does the AI target or select for? And more often, we're realizing in security scanning AI, NYPD just had this ridiculous security rollout on their subway system, which is a big PR stunt. But they put in an AI weapons recognition system in the subway that did not work at all. It was saying like your purse was a bomb. And they just stopped it after, I think, a week or two, just because it was just such a huge failure. So who is being data mined? Do they know they're being data mined? Do they know they're being targeted? Who's the target audience? These are important things to try to understand. And then how are those results used? How is your stuff being monetized? How is your time and attention or information being monetized? How does that app make its money? Is it free? There's a free level of Canva, but it's using you as the product. And then I've had subscription levels of things where, again, I get a few more features. But is there a licensing fee? Like I use stock photo sites that, okay, the artists are at least getting a fee. I'm at least paying for this. And is the monetization based entirely on your user data and targeting ads to you? That's why nothing is free. How does it collect that data? Again, is it scraping it from whatever random sources on the internet, or is it using a high quality closed data set? And then do the data sources, you and me and everybody else, do we know and or consent to the use of any of this information or creativity or whatever we're producing for this AI? And most of the time the answer is we have no idea, which is why we're doing this webinar today. So getting into how, again, I recognize this can feel incredibly overwhelming. It can feel like we're heading towards dystopia. We're not. There's a lot of reasons we may be heading for a dystopia, but this is just one thing among many. But the understanding of it is, and the having knowledge and having the power of that knowledge is really what's going to help. And so again, in the hybrid conference and in especially this next section, I'm really drawing on the work of Beth Kanter and Allison Fine, and how they go into fantastic detail in this book of practical examples of good and bad, way more than I can do in 60 or 90 minutes, on how to keep this work, any kind of automation, but particularly AI, human-centered. The only criticism I have of their work in this book is that it does not focus much at all on volunteer engagement. It talks about donors, it talks about vendors and staff and clients, constituents. I really wish that, and maybe we can whisper this in Beth's ear, that in an update that Faiza or myself or they, the original authors, can include a chapter that's specific to volunteer engagement and volunteer management software and things like that. That's my only criticism. Otherwise, it's like 9 out of 10 stars for this book. Another great person to look to or organization to look to for guidance of this is NTEN, and Amy Sample Ward specifically, and she runs the National Technology Conference for nonprofits. And this is a quote directly from Amy. I think one of the simplest and most important guidelines is that tools should not make decisions. That's been a core part of NTEN's internal approach. And she continues that at NTEN, staff can use any analysis, machine learning, or other tech systems to gather or provide some perspective or on data or information, but they must serve only as one point of analysis. NTEN staff makes all the decisions and takes all the actions. Finally, Amy says, a healthy workplace requires human connection, so professional skills development must include exercising emotional intelligence, empathy, problem formation, and creativity, because I can guarantee you AI is not good at any of those things. So that's a great site. NTEN, I think it's nten.org is the place to go for that. And then again, drawing from the research that I've done and also from Beth and Allison's book, if an org pledges to be human-centered and has that statement and follows that through with policies, that's a great way to say, this is how we're using AI, but we're informed about it and we're going to stay human-centered with it, and then walk the talk, talk the talk and walk the walk, follow through. Also, again, back to transparency, inform all staff, volunteers, clients, participants with your organization at every step of AI use, especially if you're rolling it out for the new time, and be really mindful about addressing fears and anxieties. Be sure and be really clear in your communication and your policy that AI is there for staff or volunteer support, not replacement. That's what's been happening with all the game company and tech company layoffs, is AI is replacing these workers, these engineers, because it's good at engineering. We don't want that to be the case in our sector. We're already having, enough challenges of years of pandemic and economic issues and climate change and other pressures. We don't want technophobia to have us get broken trust with the communities that we're working with. But if you're using AI, Allison has and Beth have a great point of, think about role redesign and workplace learning as this is a tool added to your toolbox. So it's not replacing anybody, but your role might change if you're able to automate some data entry or some other running VMS reports, some other tasks that were maybe, again, tedious or difficult, or it's kind of slow for a human to do it. That's really the best use of AI, particularly nonprofit work. And then have a very limited pilot, have a very specific rollout or soft launch where you start small, it's for a limited amount of time, and you or everybody else, specific parameters are in place to evaluate its effectiveness before it goes into wider use. Nonprofits are not going to help themselves or anybody else if they're just like, we've just adopted the AI crisis line that tells you where the nearest bridge is. Like, that's not going to be helpful to anybody. And this is from an interview with Beth and Microsoft's Davey Thomas from the Microsoft Foundation. And it's a great article. Again, I linked to it as one of the resources in the resource links. And Beth and Allison also have a great article in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. I linked to that. But just as a quick snapshot of how are nonprofits, how is the sector feeling about this? Thinking about it, again, I thought of it as help versus harm, but they're thinking about it as concern versus comfort, equally valid way of framing it. 60% of the nonprofit leaders say they do not trust the decisions that AI is making instead of them making them. That's on the concerns side. 63% are worried about the security risks posed by AI. Again, not just personal data, but like what's the risk and exposure risk management for the org overall. 58% are worried about the steep learning curve that their entire team must go through to understand how to use generative AI. So again, generative tends to be the things that are helping you write write stuff or create art or graphics. On the comfort side, the good news, here's some good news. 63% of nonprofit leaders say that AI is trustworthy in their workplace. So again, hopefully they're knowledgeable and they're intentional and they're mindful in how they're using it so that they do feel like they can trust this particular app or program or utilization. 64% do believe that it will enhance their creativity. Again, probably the most common usage I'm seeing is it helps me write a newsletter, get ideas for a newsletter, or get ideas for an article, or get ideas for a promo campaign for volunteer recruitment, and it helps pull those images together. 25% of nonprofit leaders believe that the most important skill that they can learn and teach their teams is the skill of when to use AI and when to use human skills. And I emphasize that because that is my main point and takeaway for all of you today is when to use this tool and when not to use this tool, because ultimately that's all it is, like having a wrench or a screwdriver in the toolbox. Which one's going to be best for the task that you have to do? Okay, let's open it up to discussion for about, let's say 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And then I've just got a quick wrap up, including those resource links before we end today around 12:30. So what have we got in chat? And also feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute people and get into a full conversation as well with the amount of folks we have here live.
And Dana, there's certainly a small group that it would be really easy to unmute folks.
Let's just unmute. Yeah, yeah. Either put it in chat or unmute, or Amy or Gretchen. Amy, if you want to get me caught up, because I've seen some chats come through while I was going through the main material. Let's get caught up on chat, and then let's start to unmute folks and really talk about this.
So Dana, while Amy's doing that, I would like to know, I mean, have you seen a lot of disclaimers out there yet? Like acceptable use policy, or, this site is not powered by AI. Any tips for like starting out where to find that? I mean, I know I heard from a local association and they realized they didn't have a privacy policy for their website. And so do you think that is a good, so question one, tips on where to try to find some of those policies, templates, and this is the irony, right? It's probably written by AI.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah.
And number two, where do you think that the best place to put that is on your website, or that people can see it? And assuming that's probably more than one place.
Yeah. The answer number one is n10.org has a lot of policy rubrics, examples, templates. I can also, I think I put one of those resources in the links. I'll double check, but I can email it to folks outwards. But there are some nonprofits that specifically focus on the best use and ethics of AI and include those kinds of templates. Again, I just started noticing in the last 6 months or so that good dear friend Rob Jackson just started to have that one sentence. And if you want to go to Rob's blog and cut and paste that one sentence because you also use ChatGPT or GPT-3 or some other writing generative AI program, then that's a really easy thing of like, this was partially created, this was, created with AI assistance, but it was written and proofread by me as a human, something to that effect. Number two, on every web page. If you're using AI for anything in your agency, have it maybe not at the top of the front page, but at least at the bottom where you might have like careers and more info or contact, and then have it more prominently disclosed if there's a landing page that is particularly connected to how you're using AI. So if you have a volunteer recruitment page and you, for whatever reason, there could be a lot of reasons, you don't have your own pictures of volunteers and you did Canva stock photos, then you might say Canva with AI assistance generated some of these photos. Just so it, keep it as simple and again, honest and transparent, as clear as possible. You don't necessarily have to write a justification, but as we know from just not only your reactions and whatever you're all feeling right now with today's information, there are absolutely people who will not volunteer for you, not donate to you, not work for you, because they are morally opposed to the use of AI, or they're technophobic about it, or they are only seeing the articles about the harm and they don't understand that it can also do good, or they've been personally harmed, like they were at a gaming company and their job was replaced with AI animation instead of them hand animating or lighting it. So people will make a decision of how you're using AI and whether or not they want to be associated with you. And other people love it and they think it's super shiny and they think it's super innovative and they're fantastic cheerleaders and ambassadors for the use of this technology, whether or not it violates copyrights. They think the good far outweighs the bad, and they might be more attracted to work with your organization if they know that you're up to date and tech savvy and using AI. So, but I think disclosing it helps people self-select, and that helps your reputation as an organization. And if you get a lot of public pushback about you rolling out a program where grants were partially written or decided based on AI, and you get a lot of like, boo, that's unfair, that whatever, respond to that honestly. What else is going on in the chat?
Yeah, we had some great questions from Angela throughout the presentation, but
Yay,
she asks, yeah, she asks if we do put on our own photos, use our own words, do we need to say that?
Yeah, I think that's worth it. I always did when I was with agencies and kind of, posting photos of and by volunteers. I always think that's our best advertisement is to, get permission. So I'd be like, photo by Bill Adams of docents on Coyote Ridge, and then the name, the first names of the people in the photo if you have them, or could you just be that general description below the photo, and also have that in the alt text for accessibility in a photo of like this, this was taken by such and such photographer, just as we've always hopefully given credit to the folks that are doing the pictures on our websites. That should continue. What's next?
I love that shout out to accessibility as well.
Yeah, that's AI it's equally hurt or harm, but because of the bias, but it can really, really help accessibility in some cases. Please go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how would you, because I do think there's a mix of really good and really bad. If there are some tools that you think would be helpful to roll out, how would you approach an organization that's really scared of the risks?
I would have an honest evaluation. I would look through and past the shiny sales pitch, which is just, it's going to try to polish everything up and maybe hide the defects or the problems in the background. It just is, it's doing due diligence. Just like, I still get a lot of calls from people choosing which volunteer management software system to use. And whenever I'm advising clients, as much as I have relationships with a lot of those companies or know the founders or are friends with people who work there, I keep it brand neutral and just do a very, fair and as unbiased as possible needs evaluation based on how is that technology going to help solve a problem. And that's really what we want these tools to do, is to solve a problem and not just use them or buy something or subscribe to something because everybody else is. But it also, the feedback loop of that can become that foundations and grant writers might want to start to give grants based on how you're using AI for better or for worse. And so that's another reason to just be as knowledgeable and intentional and transparent about its use as possible. I love it. This is great. I love this discussion. I'm glad we have the right amount of people to have a good discussion like this. And again, if people want to unmute, or Amy, if there's more in the chat, but if we want to unmute for, I don't know, another few minutes, we can definitely do that and still have time to wrap up and tell you about some more resources.
Dana, there's a question from Jerry, and I'm going to allow Jerry to talk.
Yay. Hi, Jerry.
Go ahead,
Hello, good to see you. Good to
Hi.
see you.
I love hearing from you. Go ahead.
Good. Okay, so New York Association for Volunteer Administration introduced Canva flyers as a solution before thinking about any of this. So, we've been playing with it, and we use it for promoting our events, social media presence, etc. And we use the faces of our presenters, such as you, such as Rob, such as
Mhm.
whatever. We usually run the flyer by them, beforehand and stuff like that. I'm seeing others use them. And so now I'm really nervous about, because faces that we use get parked there and stuff like that. Are there, are we at risk? Are there any precautions we should be thinking about?
It sounds like, Jerry, that you're taking the correct approach. You're getting permission from people, and like, of course, of my headshot is used to promote things, and of course, Rob's headshot or Fiza's or anybody else that's doing a presentation. Um, and at a certain point, again, I use Canva, but I upload photos that I've bought from iStock or Getty or Deposit Photos. I really like Deposit Photos as a website for getting licensed stock photos that are taken by real photographers who are paid and licensed to use their stuff. And then I upload it to Canva for like my Tuesday tips thumbnails or any other promotions I'm using. And if you start to notice that Canva or some other generative AI that Canva's selling data to, suddenly Rob's face is representing, a beer company in Alabama, like that's not necessarily your fault. That could be that Rob's picture or my picture was just out on the internet and it got grabbed. I had a weird thing happen a few years ago where like entire webinar presentations were turning up on these super sketchy Russian sites, and I had to kind of chase the site people down and threaten some legal action to it's like you don't have permission to share that. That was in a closed registration conference from 2 years ago. And they're like, oh, okay. So a lot of times companies like this, Canva's, being fairly transparent about the use of AI. So at least there's that. But there's a lot of shadier stuff going on that it's like, oh, well, it doesn't count until you get caught. And you can't be responsible for all of that, but it sounds like, you're doing the best you can. And again, using that as a tool to save time. And I'm not a graphic designer, so it's like it's not my inherent talent, but I can use a tool with my own photos to, help put stuff together and sometimes take their suggestions and sometimes not in a program like that and just do the best you can. But that's a great way to think about it.
Thanks very
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, Jerry. Cool. Well, keep letting people unmute and answer questions. And are we caught up on chat pretty well, Amy?
We are caught up
Okay.
on chat.
Okay. So now let's talk about and again, yeah, we've got 8-ish something more minutes left today together. So if any of these last few things, as we're kind of wrapping up, prompt another question or a comment, just feel free to shout that out or raise your hand. But if you have seen the thing that these weird Russian bots ripped off a few years ago of the 3 C's of happy volunteers, comfort, convenience, connection, if you've seen me do that over the years, then you know that connection is that crucial part of volunteer engagement, community engagement, and really creating or building or maintaining trust between any organization and the team members that are working with you, paid, volunteer, contractors, members of the community, constituents, clients that you're serving. That connection piece is essential. That sense of trust and that sense that we're all in this together is essential to a more positive workplace culture, and it's also essential to just the work getting done well. And within that, with AI as any number of tools in your toolbox, any number of programs or apps or platforms or dealybobs, the widgets that you're using, it's always about maintaining a high-tech, high-touch balance, that there is that human factor, that humans are really best at communication and anything to do with emotions and building relationships. So it's just a balancing act. And sometimes you're going to get it right and sometimes you're going to get it wrong. But again, being transparent and correcting mistakes or learning from your mistakes, like, thank you, take the note gracefully, that's really what counts. And it really gets down to what is the best tool for the task. I used to have to commute when I worked for an open space agency. I commuted about 100 120, 130 miles a day. I didn't have an electric car at the time, but for a commute like that on a major California freeway, an electric car would be great. That's a great way to commute. It lowers, a fossil fuel footprint. But a fancy, expensive electric car is not going to work for Donna and Moonbeam here, who's a trail patrol volunteer, and she's riding the horse on the trail and she's helping us do search and rescue. So whether it's a high tech or low tech is not as important as whether or not that is the best tool to do the task. Is an AI driven or assisted tool the best way to do that task? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. And that's part of, what we're hopefully learning today. I am absolutely certain that humans are best at creativity. I don't think we should use generative AI. I think it is going to be a financial bubble that's going to burst around Midjourney and other lawsuits and regulations in the next few years. I think that's going to crash like crypto and NFTs are, just my opinion. But machines are great at quick calculations and doing this tedious or, again, dangerous or difficult tasks that are harder for humans to do. But nothing is a substitute for human creativity, art, communication, in ingenuity in general. More and more, the response that I've seen and heard to AI is something to the effect of, and this kind of ties into what we're talking about with disclosing on Rob's blog and disclosing it on your website, but it comes down to, why would I want to read something that you didn't bother to write? What's the value in that for me? If I'm seeking art or writing as human communication or relationship building or just for the enjoyment of art, why would I want to spend my time or money on something that somebody else didn't bother to create themselves, that they extracted, that they used a tool that is art plagiarism like Midjourney? That's really what it gets down to. Why should I bother to read something that you didn't bother to write? That's a core question. And we also should keep in mind that really, any kind of ideas around community service and community engagement or volunteerism, human-centered service is the foundation of all of that. Our relationships with each other, solving problems together, coming up with creative solutions to issues together, grassroots movements, that's the core of the work we do. And a friend of mine's at MIT, and I reached out to him for research for this, and just were in conversations once when I was a professor there, and he actually works on robotics and AI and stuff like that. And he said there's a saying that goes around the MIT engineers sometimes, that there are, quote, "there are no technical solutions to social problems." It's easy to forget when you're surrounded by people seeking to improve the world with science and engineering that you can't solve humanity with technology or logic or rules. We're our own variables, we have our own emotional ups and downs and unpredictabilities. And that's what's beautiful and wonderful about life and the human experience. So are we serving the technology, like being the users and the consumers and the product that's sold of AI, or is the technology a tool that we are choosing to use? And that's really that's the core question that leads to ethics and accuracy and staying human-centered in all of this work. And here are the links that I promised you, and you don't have to necessarily grab them from the slide, but copy of the slideshow, and we can email you these links, or we can send them to you, as a follow-up, and you can get in touch with me. But UNESCO, it has artificial intelligence ethics recommendations. That's really important, and that's informing a lot of government regulation decisions. Nonprofit Pro has a great article on kind of some of what we've talked about today, but also some other details of like how maybe nonprofits aren't using AI in the best way we could be for the best results. And then this LinkedIn story that I don't think was AI generated, about the US and the UK signing a safety agreement. Again, the regulations are trying to kind of keep up with all of this technological progress. And then physics.org had a great kind of, that's where I really got a lot of the details about the use of water, the use of energy, but it goes into many more case studies of how the AI boom and the need for more land for servers and more energy, more fossil fuels, water use to cool servers running all this information, the specific environmental impacts, including Peifeng Li's work with his colleagues. That's much more detailed in that article. And then the last link, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, 8 Steps Nonprofits Can Take to Adopt AI Responsibly. That is that interview, an article that Beth and Allison contributed to, and I've pulled a couple of examples and mixed in some of my own. But again, that dives in deeper to this topic. So you can do search engines and search results that accurately take you to things like this, but just maybe skip through the search engine optimization ads and placements in maybe the first 5 or 10 results you get, and then start to look in the second half of the page of search engine results to something that doesn't have a tiny little icon of an ad next to it. And that's a good way to try to get the most accurate results you can online. And if you have any follow-up questions, I am very easy to find online. I'm all over the place. I try to be. I'm a real person. I'm not an AI-generated CGI sim model. So you can email me. You can go to my website, contact me through that, or get some more info. A lot of you on the call, I know in real life, of course, you know how to find me. And several of you on the call are already well aware of my YouTube channel and the free videos I put out on this topic. And you can find me on the socials. I'm still technically on Twitter, even though it's a dumpster fire, but I'm also on Spoutable and Blue Sky. And then you can find me on Facebook with all the other Gen X and older folks, and on LinkedIn as well, not contributing to their AI generated articles. So I'm really glad to have this time with you today. I know we've done a tiny bit over our 90 minutes, but I'm really, really grateful to Alive Academy and Gretchen and Amy and all of you for spending this time together today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. How about that? There we go. Yay.
Well, thank you, Dana, very much. And you'll see here, there's a link to today's Alive Academy, and we'd love to have your feedback. This comes to a real person now that I'm thinking learning. Well, this is like the old-fashioned learning, human learning.
What? Teachers and students and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just really opened up my brain there. And just a couple of quick announcements. Next year's hybrid conference, or this year's hybrid conference, is all about creating influence in your organization, thinking beyond a seat at the table. And I put in the link there in the chat, the link to sign up for the mailing list. I think host site registration will open probably very early in June, and individual registration will open in July. So you'll be seeing more about that. And if you want to go to the next couple of slides, Amy, of course, if you want more information about joining Alive, if you're not a member. And then if you need anything else, you can always email me. And again, just like Dana, a real person. And
I know where you live.
I know, he knows where I live. Just want to thank all of you for your time today. Brina, for your
My
Dana.
name is Brayna. I am a robot. Yes.
Dana, for your trust here, and some really great things to think about. So just want to say thank you again. And we, oh yeah, and we would love to hear a song to send us out.
Suddenly Seymour standing beside me. Don't look at the eclipse without eye protection today. Although the time has passed, it's already happened. In the path of totality, safe travels today.
That's great. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.